Hi everyone, thanks for joining me here on JKD Handmade. For this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to work up this crochet extreme drop stitch lemon peel sweater. So we'll be working the sweater in parts. We'll begin at the bottom of the sweater. So this is the length of the sweater. So you can decide on whether you want it at the hip or just slightly above the hip or at the waist or cropped. So here's the bottom of the sweater and we'll be working it in the round. So we're working both the front and the back of the sweater all in one go. Then we'll work the body of the sweater up until the underarm. So we'll work it to about 3 inches below the underarm. We'll work our stitch pattern and then we're separating the front and the back of the sweater. We'll work the back and then we'll work the front, and at the same time we'll form the neckline. We'll work the sleeve bottom up and we'll join that by seaming it onto the body of the sweater. We'll finish off with ribbings along the sleeves of the sweater, along the neckline, and along the bottom edge of the sweater. This pattern is worked according to body measurements. You'll find all the measurements in the tutorial as we go along. This pattern is for women's sizes extra small to 5XL. When working the sweater, use the measurement for the size that you are working on. I will be working a size medium. I will be using all the measurements for a size medium. For the materials, you will need yarn. I use this double knit, light worsted or category 3, 100% acrylic yarn in 3 colors. Now, in my opinion, I would not suggest another weight simply because when working this stitch pattern, the extreme drop stitch, I find it really difficult to pick up loops onto my hook if the yarn is any thicker than a double knit. When working the stitch pattern, you need to pick up quite a few loops onto your hook to complete the stitch pattern, and it is quite difficult with a category 4 or a category 5. So I'm sticking to a double knit when working this sweater. Apart from the yarn, you will also need hooks. So I'm going with 2 hooks. One of them is the recommended hook on the yarn label, which is a 4mm hook. And I'll use the 4mm for the ribbings on my sleeves. And for the rest of the sweater, I'll use a 6mm hook. So that's a hook that is 2 sizes up on the recommended hook on the yarn label. Apart from the hooks, you'll need a measuring tape, stitch markers, a pair of scissors, and a yarn or a wool needle. So that does it for the intro to this video. If you enjoy my patterns and my tutorials, please give a thumbs up on this video and do consider subscribing and commenting. I would love to know from which part of the world you're watching from. Okay, let's get on with this tutorial. Hope you enjoy. Form a slip knot using the larger hook. Chain 4. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now these 3 chains, 1, 2, 3, those 3 chains will form the first stitch. I generally count that as my first stitch. And we'll be working our second stitch into this first chain right here. Yarn over, insert your hook into the first chain, pull up a loop. You've got 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over and go through only 1 loop on your hook. That way you form a little chain right here, and that becomes the start of the next stitch. Then it's yarn over, go through 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over, go through 2 loops on your hook. That way we formed our second stitch. And these 3 chains, as I explained, this chain right here from the 3 chains becomes our first stitch. If if you look at it here, here's our second stitch right there. Continuing on, yarn over, insert your hook into that little chain we formed earlier on, going through both the loops from that chain, pull up a loop. You've got 3 loops on your hook, yarn over and go through 1 loop on your hook. Here you formed a little chain and that becomes the start of the next stitch. Then yarn over, go through 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over, go through 2 loops on your hook. Here we formed our 3rd stitch right there. You continue on working this foundation double crochet, which is our round 1, until you've worked a length of stitches. Here are the shoulder to shoulder measurements for the different sizes. Use the measurement for the size that you are working on. So I've worked a length of stitches for my foundation round. Here it is. At this point, I'm going to measure this length of stitches. So for the sake of this recording, I will fold my foundation round in half. That way I can get the full recording on camera. This length of stitches is quite long, so I will not be able to get the full measurement otherwise. Now, I'll fold it in half, but you don't have to. You will measure out your shoulder to shoulder measurement times 2. So for a size medium, the shoulder to shoulder measurement is 16 inches. And then times 2, that would be 32 inches for a size medium. Now here you see I'm measuring out 16 inches simply because my length of stitches is folded in half. Or that would be around 41 centimeters. So you would measure the entire length of stitches unstretched. So it's your shoulder to shoulder measurement times 2. That would be 32 inches for a size medium. Or if you're working in centimeters, that would be around 81 centimeters. Now, once you've worked this foundation row to the correct length, you need to count the number of stitches. The stitch pattern that we would be using works in multiples of 11. So your stitch count needs to be in multiples of 11. Okay, so just recapping, you first need to get your foundation row to the correct length, and then you're going to adjust to a multiple of 11. Now I've counted my stitches and I have 108 stitches. To bring it to a multiple of 11, I need to add on 2 more stitches. That way it would be 110 stitches, which is a multiple of 11. So here I'll work those 2 stitches. Now when adjusting your foundation round, I find that it's best to increase only if you have 5 or less stitches to add on. But should you have more than 5 stitches, I think that it would be better to decrease to get to a multiple of 11. By decrease, I mean removing your stitches to bring it to a multiple of 11. Because you would find that after you've worked row 2 and row 3, this entire length of stitches, it does stretch out even further. So to prevent going too wide on your body, I would prefer decreasing if you have more than 6 stitches to adjust your stitch count by. If you're looking for a loose fit or even an oversized fit on your sweater, you can go ahead and only choose to increase on that on the stitches to adjust your stitch count. I often get asked, how many stitches do I use? The thing is, I don't know, because we all using different body measurements. Now you would have to adjust your foundation round according to the body measurement that you use. Okay, so now we are going to join the first and last stitch. Take note that the first stitch is the third chain from chain 3. As I explained earlier on, I counted that initial chain 3 as my first stitch. You can slip stitch to join. Now you will find along the bottom edge of our stitches, it's left opened as you see here. So we will use our tail end to close up on that opening. But for now, we'll continue on with round 2. Round 2, chain 2. Chain 2 counts as a double crochet. Turn, work double crochets into the next 5 stitches. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Here's my 5 stitches, including the chain 2, it's 6 stitches. Then chain 1, skip the next stitch, and into the next stitches work 10 double crochets. So here I have my chain 1, skip 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 double crochets. So the stitch pattern is chain 1, skip 1 stitch, 10 double crochets. You'll repeat that stitch pattern all the way around. I've worked my way to the end of round 2. Here's my stitch pattern, chain 1, skip 1, 10 double crochets. Now when you get to the end of the round, you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches remaining. Then it's chain 1, skip the next stitch, and work 4 double crochets into the remaining stitches. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. To end the round, slip stitch into the second chain from chain 2 to join. Now, if you count your stitches on either side of the chain 1 spaces, you must have 10 stitches as I do here. And that just keeps our stitch pattern consistent throughout the round. Round 3, chain 2 and turn. Chain 2 counts as a double crochet. Into the next 2 stitches, work double crochets. So that's 1 and 2. Together with the chain 2, we have 3 stitches. Then it's chain 1, skip the next stitch, and work 3 double crochets. So here you're working your first double crochet into the stitch, and then your second double crochet into the chain 1 space, and your third double crochet into a stitch. Here you have your 3 double crochets. Then chain 1, skip the next stitch, and work double crochets into the next 6 stitches. Here it is, the chain 1, skip 1, 6 double crochets. So your stitch pattern is chain 1, skip 1 stitch, 3 double crochets. So with these 3 double crochets, the center double crochet will always be worked into the chain 1 space. And then it's a chain 1, skip the next stitch, 6 double crochets. Repeat this pattern sequence to the end of the round. I've continued on to the end of the round. This is what my round 3 looks like. It's a chain 1, skip 1, 6 double crochets, chain 1, skip 1, 3 double crochets. Here I am. I've worked my way to the end with 3 double crochets, and I have 4 stitches remaining. So I'll chain 1, skip the next stitch, and work 3 double crochets into those last 3 stitches. So that's 1, 2, and 3. To end the round, slip stitch into the second chain from chain 2 to join. Notice that you have 6 stitches from chain 1 space to chain 1 space on either side of start. Round 4, chain 2 and turn. Double crochet into the next stitch. Then chain 1, skip the next stitch and work double crochets into the next 7 stitches and chain 1 spaces. Notice that your second double crochet will be into a chain 1 space, and thereafter it will be your 6th double crochet that is into the next chain 1 space. Here I'm working my 6th double crochet into the chain 1 space. Here's those 7 double crochets that I've just worked. Then it's chain 1, skip the next stitch and work double crochets into the next 2 stitches. So that's 1 and 2. So your stitch pattern for this round is chain 1, skip the next stitch, 7 double crochets, then it's chain 1, skip the next stitch, 2 double crochets. Repeat the stitch pattern all the way to the end. I've continued to the end of this round and I have 1 stitch remaining. So I'll chain 1, skip that last stitch and slip stitch into the second chain from chain 2 to join. Now that I've worked a few rounds, I do want to show you that this length of stitches does stretch out. So I had started off with 16 inches. That's when my length of stitches was doubled. And you can see now that my length of stitches has increased to 18 inches. So round 2, round 3, and round 4 were set up rounds for round 5, where we will be working the extreme drop stitch pattern. Now, in order to work the extreme drop stitch, we need these chain 1 spaces right here. And we will be working loops into these chain 1 spaces. These 5 chain 1 spaces. When working these loops, you will need to work them in a certain sequence. So it will always be in these sets of 5 chain 1 spaces. 1 extreme drop stitch will be worked into 5 chain 1 spaces. Apart from that, the sequence in which we work these loops will always be from the first chain 1 space to the second, third, fourth, and fifth. Okay, so before continuing on with round 5, we do need to change the color of our yarn. I'm going back to undo the slip stitch that I've worked to join round 4. Here I've got the chain 1 and I've skipped the last stitch. Now when joining to complete the round, you're going to get into that second chain from chain 2 and drop your first yarn color, bring in your change of color and pull that through to complete the slip stitch. Continuing on with the change of color, chain 2, here we're working round 5. Chain 2 counts as a double crochet. Now for this round, we will not turn. Into the same stitch as chain 2, double crochet. Now I do want to go back and cut off on the tail end of my previous color before continuing on. So here we've worked 2 stitches into 1. Into the next stitch, work 2 double crochets. So we've started off round 5 with 4 double crochets. Then chain 3, 1, 2, 3. And now we'll be working the extreme drop stitch into these 5 chain spaces. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. When working the stitch, we will be picking up loops into these chain 1 spaces. Do not confuse your 5th chain space with the 1st chain space of the next set of chain spaces. It's always these 5 chain spaces, the set of 5, that will make up one extreme drop stitch. Now when working the extreme drop stitch pattern, we will be picking up loops into these chain spaces. So in the first chain space, you will pick up 2 loops. In the second chain space, you will pick up 2 loops. In the third chain space, you will pick up 3 loops. In the 4th chain space, you will pick up 2 loops. And in the 5th chain space, you will pick up 2 loops. Always follow that sequence when working the extreme drop stitch. Also, there will always be a chain 3 before and after the extreme drop stitch pattern. Now to work the extreme drop stitch, it's yarn over, insert your hook into the first chain space, pull up a loop, elongate the loop, yarn over, insert your hook into the same chain space, pull up a loop, elongate the loop. You've done this twice into the first chain space. Now for the second chain space, yarn over, insert your hook into that chain space, pull up a loop, elongate the loop, yarn over, insert your hook into the second chain space, pull up a loop, elongate the loop. So you've done this twice into the second chain space. Now for the third chain space, yarn over, insert your hook into the third chain space, pull up a loop, elongate the loop, yarn over, insert your hook into the chain space, pull up a loop, elongate the loop, yarn over, insert your hook into that third chain space, pull up a loop, elongate the loop. So you've done this 3 times. Now for the 4th chain space, right here, yarn over, insert your hook into the 4th chain space, pull up a loop, elongate the loop, yarn over, insert your hook into the same chain space, pull up a loop, elongate the loop. You've done this twice. Now for the 5th chain space, make certain that you're not confusing your 5th and your 1st chain spaces. Yarn over, insert your hook into that 5th chain space, pull up a loop, elongate the loop. Yarn over, insert your hook into the chain space, pull up a loop and elongate the loop. Then to complete the stitch, yarn over and pull through all those loops on your hook except for the last loop. So you'll see that the last loop is that loop that's attached to the chain 3, and that's the loop that you do want to keep behind on your hook. Then it's yarn over and pull through those 2 loops on your hook. That's the extreme drop stitch all done. Then it's chain 3. As I explained earlier on, you will always have a chain 3 before and after the extreme drop stitch. Then into the next stitch, work 2 double crochets. So here you're working 2 double crochets into 1 stitch. Into the next stitch, work 2 double crochets. Again, it's 2 double crochets into 1 stitch. Now we've come to our next set of chain 1 spaces where we'll work an extreme drop stitch into those 5 chain 1 spaces. So it's chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Then for the extreme drop stitch, I'll work 2 loops into the first chain 1 space. I'll work 2 loops into the second chain 1 space. I'll work 3 loops into the third chain 1 space. I'll work 2 loops into the fourth chain 1 space, and I'll work 2 loops into the fifth chain 1 space. Then to complete the stitch, yarn over and pull through all those loops except for the last loop. This is the loop that's attached to the chain 3. Yarn over and pull through those 2 loops on your hook. Then it's chain 3, 2 double crochets into the next stitch, and 2 double crochets into the next stitch. Now that's your stitch pattern for the rest of this round. Repeat to complete this round. I've worked my way to the end of round 5. I've completed the last extreme drop stitch. So I'll chain 3 and slip stitch into the second chain from chain 2 to join. Now for round 6, chain 2, 1, 2, chain 2 counts as a double crochet and turn. Here we're working double crochets into all double crochets. We'll work 3 double crochets into the chain 3 spaces, and we'll work 1 double crochet above the extreme drop stitch. So into the chain 3 space, we'll work 3 double crochets. So that's 1, 2, and 3. Into the stitch above the extreme drop stitch, we'll work 1 double crochet. Then it's 3 double crochets into the chain 3 space. Then it's 1 double crochet per double crochet from the previous round. So here it's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Continue with the stitch pattern to the end of the round. I've continued on to complete round 6. I've slip stitched into the second chain from chain 2 to join. Round 7, here we will be working the lemon peel stitch pattern, where we will be alternating our stitches between single crochet and double crochet. To begin, chain 1 and turn, single crochet into that same stitch from where chain 1 comes out of. Into the next stitch, double crochet. Into the next stitch, single crochet. Into the next stitch, double crochet. Into the next stitch, single crochet. So all we're doing for this round is alternating between double crochet and single crochet. Continue on to the end of the round. I've worked my way to the end of round 7. So when you get to the end, it's important that you follow your stitch pattern. Now you'll see here I worked a double crochet. That means in my last stitch I need to work a single crochet. But that wouldn't work because I had begun this round with a single crochet. So for me to keep that stitch pattern, I need to work 2 stitches into the last stitch. So here I'll work a single crochet and a double crochet. That way I maintain my stitch pattern. With my last stitch being a double crochet, I'll slip stitch into that single crochet to complete the round. Now, if you find that your last stitch is a double crochet, there is no need to work 2 stitches into that last stitch. You will just continue on and slip stitch to join. Okay, so with the lemon peel stitch pattern, you are always alternating your stitches within the round, and then you are also alternating your stitches with each round that you work. So like in the previous round, I had started off with a single crochet. So in my next round, as you see here, I'm starting off with a chain 2, which counts as a double crochet. So I will always be working double crochets into single crochets from the previous round and single crochets into double crochets from the previous round. So then it's turn, and into the next stitch I'll work a single crochet. That stitch was a double crochet from the previous round, and then into my next stitch, which is a single crochet from the previous round right here. And you will be able to make out your single crochets. You'll find that the gaps of the single crochets are bigger than that of the double crochets from the previous round. So into that single crochet from the previous round, I'll work a double crochet. My next stitch from the previous round is a double crochet, so I'll work a single crochet into that stitch. And then it's a double crochet into the next stitch, a single crochet into the next stitch, a double crochet into the next stitch, and so on. You always alternating your stitches, working double crochets into single crochets and single crochets into double crochets. Continue on to the end of the round. I've worked my way to the end of the round, and here I've worked a double crochet into my second last stitch. I have one more stitch to go. So I've started off with a double crochet. That means my last stitch can be a single crochet, and then I'll slip stitch into the second chain from chain 2 to join. Now for the next round, because we had started our previous round with a chain 2, which is a double crochet, here we'll chain 1, turn, single crochet into the same stitch as chain 1, and then thereafter we're working a double crochet into the next stitch. We'll work a single crochet into the next stitch, and we'll continue on alternating between single crochet and double crochet all the way to the end of the round. We can slip stitch to join to end. So all we're doing here is repeating round 7 and round 8. I've continued on with my stitch pattern. I've repeated round 7 and round 8 until the body of this sweater, measuring from the bottom, which is the length of the sweater going upwards, reaches just below the underarm. So that's around 3 inches or 7.5 centimeters below the underarm. We will work the setup rounds and the extreme drop stitch pattern, which will measure 3 inches or 7.5 centimeters to take this length for the body right up to the underarm. Now, if you want to lengthen on your sweater, you will work more repeats of round 7 and 8. And if you want to shorten up on your sweater, you will work less repeats of round 7 and round 8. You will decide on the length of your sweater. So round 1 is the length of the sweater. That would either be at your hip, your upper hip, your waist, or shorter than that. And then you would work upwards to the underarm. So the last 3 inches or 7.5 centimeters will be worked right to the underarm. And those 3 inches or 7.5 centimeters is a repeat of round 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Here you see, I'll measure it for you, and that gives me 3 inches or 7.5 centimeters. Now, before you work a repeat of round 2, you do need to go ahead and count the number of stitches. Remember, you need to have your stitch count in multiples of 11 to work the extreme drop stitch pattern. If you need to adjust your stitch count, you may work an increase or a decrease into the last 1 or 2 stitches. Continuing on, I've counted my stitches and it's in multiples of 11. I will now repeat round 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the stitch pattern, and that way making up my 3 inches. I've continued on with the body of the sweater. At this point, I've worked from the bottom, which is the length, to the underarm. I've worked the 3 inches. I changed to my 3rd color of yarn after the round 4 repeat. So I finished off with a round 7 repeat, which was the lemon peel stitch pattern. We will now separate the body of the sweater into the front and the back. So I've got it folded here in half, and I've got my start along that side edge. And on the opposite side, right here, I will place a stitch marker into that folded edge. By doing so, we've now marked off the back separation, as you see here, from start to the stitch marker. That would be the back separation, and from the stitch marker to start, that would be the front separation. We will be working the front and back separately. Here are the armhole depth measurements for the different sizes. Use the measurement for the size you are working on. We're now working the back body. So we're continuing on with the lemon peels stitch pattern. The only difference is we're working from start to the stitch marker, back and forth. To continue on, you've got to see which stitch you had started off the previous round with. So I had started that last round with a double crochet. Here I'm going to chain 1, turn, single crochet into the same stitch as chain 1, and then I'll work my stitch pattern, which is a double crochet, single crochet, double crochet, single crochet, and continue on until I reach the stitch marker on the opposite side. You are at all times alternating your stitches within the round, as well as working double crochets into single crochets and single crochets into double crochets from the previous round. Continue on until you reach the stitch marker on the opposite side. I've worked my way to the stitch marker. Here's the start and here's the stitch marker. So I've worked my last stitch into that stitch that was marked off with the stitch marker. My last stitch was a single crochet, so I'll chain 2, which counts as a double crochet, and I'll continue on with my stitch pattern, which is single crochet, double crochet, single crochet, working my way back to start. So I've worked a few more rounds, but there's just one thing that I must bring to your attention. Now, if you remember, we are using a chain 2 that counts as a double crochet. So do not forget to work your last stitch into the second chain from chain 2. If you do not work that last stitch, you will find that this piece is going to go askew. So here I am, I'm working a single crochet into that second chain from chain 2 from the previous round, in order to avoid this piece from going askew. I've continued on with this back portion of my sweater. Now when working these upper portions of the sweater. We are looking for this portion of the sweater to measure the armhole depth measurement. Now, at the same time, I do want to work in a neckline. So in order to work the neckline, I need to work this back portion half an inch shorter than the armhole depth measurement. I've worked my back portion to 7 inches, but the armhole depth measurement for a size medium is 7.5 inches. So I've worked it to half an inch shorter than the armhole depth measurement for the size that I'm working on. When measuring, make certain that you are measuring from the top edge to the stitch marker or from the stitch marker to the top edge and not from that round 7 repeat. We will now work the back shoulders and at the same time form the neckline for the back portion. To do so, we need to mark off the neckline. Fold the piece in half as I am doing here. Place a stitch marker to mark off the folded edge. Open up on the folded piece and measure 2 inches on either side of the stitch marker. Mark off with stitch markers. For sizes 2XL to 5XL, you can measure 5 inches in total for your neckline. So that's 2.5 inches on either side of the stitch marker. And for sizes extra small to extra large, keep your neckline at 4 inches. So that's 2 inches on either side of the stitch marker. That would be 4 inches or 10 centimeters. Now, if that seems too small for a neckline, do keep in mind that when we work the front portion, we will be including depth into this neckline. So that would widen up on our neckline even further. Remove the center stitch marker as we no longer need it. So now we will work the shoulders on either side. So we'll start from where we had stopped at start, working towards the stitch marker. We're just working 1 row here, and we're working the lemon peel stitch pattern. So you'll continue on from where you had stopped, working your stitch pattern to the stitch marker. I've worked my last stitch into the stitch before the one that's marked off. So I'll fasten off and cut off on the excess yarn. Reattach yarn to the stitch next to the stitch marker on the opposite side as I am doing here. Take note of the stitch that you've reattached yarn into. Here I've reattached yarn into a double crochet, so my stitch pattern would be a chain 1, single crochet, and I'll continue on with my lemon peel stitch pattern. I've worked the second shoulder on the back portion. You can then fasten off, leaving behind a long enough tail to help with the seaming. And that completes the back portion of the sweater. We will now work the front portion. Attach yarn to the stitch next to the stitch marker on the one side, as I am doing here. Now you're working the lemon peel stitch pattern back and forth along the front portion. So you're following the same rules. You're working double crochets into single crochets and single crochets into double crochets. Work back and forth from stitch marker to start until the front portion measures 3 inches or 8 centimeters shorter than the back portion. We will now mark off the shoulders. In order to mark off the shoulders, you must count the number of stitches used along the back shoulders and mark off the same number of stitches for the front shoulders as I have done here. We will now work the front shoulders just as we had done for the back, working back and forth from start to stitch marker on one side, and then reattach yarn to the next stitch next to the stitch marker and work back and forth on the opposite side. You want to make sure that your shoulders, the top edges of your shoulders, meet both front and back. And by doing so, we do create depth along the neckline. This makes the neckline much larger than the measurement we had initially taken along the back portion. I've continued on and I've worked my front shoulders. The edges of the front and back panels line up, the top edges as you see here. We will now seam along the shoulders to join the front and the back. You do want to make certain that before seaming, your piece is right sides facing in and wrong sides facing out. I've seamed along the shoulders on either side. Here are the sleeve length measurements for the different sizes. Use the measurement for the size that you are working on. For the sleeve, work a foundation double crochet just as you had done when working the body of the sweater. So it's a repeat of round 1. This length of stitches must fit around the wrist. The hand must be able to slip in and out with ease. Just as we had done for the body, we need to join both ends of round 1 to form a ring. So into that third chain from chain 3, slip stitch to join. We will come back and join the bottom edge of these stitches. For round 2, we will be working increases. We will work an increase on either side of start. Chain 1 and turn. Single crochet into the same stitch as chain 1. Work 2 single crochets into the next stitch. This counts as an increase. Continue on working single crochets all the way to the last stitch. I've worked my way to the last stitch. Into the last stitch, work 2 single crochets. This counts as the second increase, and then slip stitch into the first single crochet to join. You can now count your stitches. We need to get our stitch count to a multiple of 11 in the next round. So I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 2, 4, 6, 8, 30. So I've got 30 stitches. Now to bring it to a multiple of 11, I need to add on 3 stitches. That would be 33, and it's a multiple of 11. So you will go ahead, count your stitches, and decide on how many stitches you need to increase by in the next round to bring it to a multiple of 11 in order to work our stitch pattern in the following rounds. For the 3 increases that I need to work, I will work my first increase right next to start. I will work my last increase on the opposite side of start, and in between those 2 increases, I will work my second increase. That gives me an increase of 3 stitches. Make certain that when you're working your increases, you are spacing them out more or less evenly throughout the round. Do not work them one after the other. Always space out your increases. For round 3 of the sleeve, we're working double crochets, and at the same time we'll work those increases. Begin with a chain 2, turn. I'll work my first increase into the next stitch. That's 2 double crochets into 1 stitch. And I'll continue on with double crochets until I get to more or less halfway around this sleeve. Do keep in mind that the number of increases we all work would differ because we are working according to body measurements. The thing to remember is that you must space out your increases. Space it out evenly, more or less evenly throughout the round. So I've worked my way to more or less the middle of this round. Here I'm working my second increase. That's 2 double crochets into 1 stitch. And then I'll work double crochets to my last stitch. I've continued on into my last stitch. I worked the 3rd increase and then I slip stitched to join. That brings my stitch count to 33, which is a multiple of 11. So for the next round, we will be repeating the stitch pattern as was done for the body. So I'm talking about round 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and onwards to work the lemon peel stitch pattern. So your stitch pattern is exactly the same. It's chain 2, turn, 5 double crochets, and then it's a chain 1, skip 1, 10 double crochets. Work it exactly the same as you did for the body. I've continued on. I've repeated round 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, just as I did for the body. Now for the next round, we will be working an increase round. That way our sleeve widens up as we get to the upper arm. We need the upper edge of this sleeve to fit into the armhole space of the body. So we need to work increase rounds to widen up on the sleeve, making it fit into the armhole space of the body. We need to widen up on our sleeve so that the upper edge of our sleeve measures the same armhole depth measurement that we had used for the body. So for the next round, we will work an increase round. You may work as many increase rounds as need be to widen up on your sleeve. Here I'm chaining 1. I'll work a single crochet into that same stitch as chain 1. Now this is the second round of our lemon peel stitch pattern, so we do need to follow the pattern sequence. For the lemon peel stitch pattern, to work an increase, we will be working 3 stitches into 1 stitch as opposed to working 2 stitches for an increase. And that way we're able to keep or maintain our stitch pattern. I'll work a double crochet, a single crochet, and a double crochet all into 1 stitch. Now if you look at it here, I've started off with a single crochet, and then it's a double crochet, single crochet, double crochet. So I've maintained my stitch pattern. Into the next stitch, I'll work a single crochet and then a double crochet. I'll continue on with the lemon peel stitch pattern until I get to the last stitch. I've worked my way to the last stitch. I've worked a single crochet into the second last stitch, and here's my last stitch. I'll work a double crochet into that stitch, and then I'll slip stitch into the single crochet that I had started off with to join. For the next round, it's chain 2, which counts as a double crochet, turn into the next stitch, single crochet, continue with the lemon peel stitch pattern all the way to the end of the round. I've continued on and I've worked a few more rounds of the lemon peel stitch pattern. I've worked my way to around half of the sleeve, just about to the elbow. At this point, I do want to work another increase round. I had started off my previous round with a double crochet, so in this round, it's a chain 1, turn, single crochet into the same stitch as chain 1. I'll go ahead and work an increase into the next stitch, so that's a double crochet, single crochet, double crochet, all into one stitch, and that counts as an increase. Then I'll work a single crochet into the next stitch, following my stitch pattern. I started off with a single crochet, then it's a double crochet, single crochet, double crochet, a single crochet into the stitch. Continue on with the lemon peel stitch pattern to the end of the round. At all times, you do need to check on the armhole depth measurement. Once you reach the armhole depth measurement on the width of your sleeve, you do want to stop with any further increase rounds. I've continued on. I've worked a few more rounds. Now, if I measure the width of my sleeve, it measures around just below 6.5 inches. So I need to get my sleeve to 7.5 inches in width, because that was my armhole depth measurement for a size medium. I've still got a few more rounds to work before I reach the sleeve length for my size. Now, if I take the sleeve length measurement, the sleeve length for a size medium must be 17 inches or 43 centimeters. So if I measure the sleeve length that I've worked thus far, you can see from the bottom going up, it measures 11 inches. That means I still have 6 inches to work before getting to my sleeve length measurement, which is 17 inches. Now with the stitch pattern, I do need to work my sleeve to 4 inches shorter or less than the actual sleeve length, as I do need to work the extreme drop stitch pattern, and that would be the 3 inches. And when I go to the bottom of my sleeve, I do need to work a ribbing, and that would be 1 inch. So I'm going to continue on with my sleeve until it measures the sleeve length less 4 inches or 10 centimeters. So I've continued on with the sleeve, and at the same time, I've also worked the second sleeve so that you can have a clear idea of what I mean by the sleeve length less 4 inches. Now, for the sleeve that's closer to you, I've worked a complete sleeve, and the next sleeve, that's the sleeve that I'm busy with, and at this point it measures the sleeve length less 4 inches. So for a size medium, that would be 17 inches less 4 inches. That would give me 13 inches. The completed sleeve measures 17 inches or 43 centimeters. That's after I've worked the ribbing along the bottom edge and I worked the extreme drop stitch pattern detail along the top edge of the sleeve. So my sleeve ribbing was more or less 1 inch, maybe slightly longer than 1 inch, and the extreme drop stitch pattern detail along the top edge was 3 inches. So together that would make up the 4 inches that we are stopping short on our sleeve. I hope that this gives you a better understanding of why we are working the sleeve to 4 inches less than the sleeve length measurement for the size that we are working on. At the moment, my sleeve measures 13 inches. So here it is. If I compare the two, that's the 13 inches. And then when I work the ribbing and the extreme drop stitch pattern detail along the top edge, my sleeve should measure the sleeve length measurement for the size that I'm working on, which is 17 inches. Now that I've got my sleeve to the sleeve length measurement, less 4 inches, I can continue on with the extreme drop stitch pattern detail along the top edge. But before doing so, I need to make certain that my stitch count is in multiples of 11. And also that the width of my sleeve is able to fit the armhole depth on the body of the sweater. Now you'll see here that my sleeve does get wider as we go up, and that's because we've worked increases. Now at this point, my sleeve measures 7 inches, and that's perfect because the armhole depth measurement for a size medium is 7.5 inches. And once I work the extreme drop stitch pattern detail, my sleeve will widen up even more. So here, if we look at it, the sleeve needs to fit the armhole depth measurement on the body of the sweater. I found that I only needed to work an increase along the bottom of my sleeve and then towards the middle of my sleeve, and I'll work my next increase when I am getting ready to work the extreme drop stitch pattern, because remember, we do need to bring up our stitch count to a multiple of 11. Okay, so I'll go ahead and count my stitches. I've counted, I have 36 stitches. So the closest multiple to 11 is 44 stitches minus 36. That means I need to increase by 8 stitches to bring it to a multiple of 11. Now for the sleeve, I have to increase to bring it up to a multiple of 11, only because I've got to keep my sleeve width wide enough so that it fits into that armhole depth along the body. If I decrease, I'm going to definitely narrow on my sleeve, so I don't want to do that. I've chosen to work this entire sleeve with you on camera. I think that maybe it would give you a better understanding of the sleeve. So here goes with the increase round. I've chained 2 because my stitch from the previous round was a single crochet. So that means in this round, it's got to be a double crochet. Now remember, for increases, we're working 3 stitches into 1 stitch. So that's a single crochet, a double crochet, and a single crochet all into 1 stitch. Now when working the stitch pattern, every time you work an increase, you are increasing by 2 stitches. So here we've started off with our chain 2, which is a double crochet. Then it was a single crochet, double crochet, single crochet. So I've maintained my stitch pattern. Into the next stitch, I'll work a double crochet, then a single crochet. And at the same time, while working this increase, I've increased by 2 stitches. So from those 8 increases that I needed to work, I can remove 2 increases, and I've got 6 more increases to work. Continuing on, I'll work my stitch pattern. So when working increases, you do want to space them apart. You do not want to work them one after the other. I'll work a few stitches in between, and then I'll work my next increase. I'll try to space these 4 increases throughout this round. So here I've worked a few stitches, and at this point I'll work an increase into the next stitch. When working this increase, here I've worked a double crochet, so I'll work a single crochet, double crochet, single crochet, all into one stitch. And with this increase, I've managed to increase by 2 stitches. So I've removed the 2 stitches, so I've got 4 more stitches to add on. So that means I've got to work 2 more increases. Now I'll continue on with my stitch pattern to the next point where I'd work my 3rd increase. And if you have an odd number to increase by, I will show you once I get to the end how to increase by that odd number. Like for example, if you have to increase by 5 stitches, because with every increase you increase by 2 stitches, so that means you'll have to increase by 2 increases to get 4 stitches in. And then what happens with that last stitch to make up 5 increases? I will explain to you once we get to the end. Now here's my 3rd increase. So I've increased by 2 stitches. I've got 1 more increase to work. I'll work my way to the end, continuing on with my stitch pattern. So just a side note, this was incredibly difficult for me to explain. I can only hope that I did come across well, and or maybe I was clearly understood. The sleeve is slightly complicated because you are always paying attention to the width of the sleeve as well as the length of the sleeve. But you've got to take it step by step, and you need to work as many increases as need be to get your sleeve to the correct width. And also you've got to pay attention to your sleeve. Like you've got to continuously measure out your sleeve, that you are on track to the correct width and the correct length. Okay, so here I am at the last stitch. I'll work my last increase. So that means with this increase, I've completed all my increases. I've finished off with these 2 increases, and that brought my stitch count, that will bring my stitch count to 44 stitches, which is a multiple of 11. I can then slip stitch to join into that first stitch. Now, if you have an odd number of increases to work, let's say you have 7 increases to work. Okay, so I know that with the 3 increases that I've worked, I increased by 6 stitches. So here's the first increase, that was 2 stitches, and then my second increase, that was 2 stitches, my third increase, that would be 2 stitches, and I'm left with only 1 stitch. So what do you do in that case? So all you're going to do here is at the end, into the last stitch, you'll work just 2 stitches. And it doesn't really matter. I know that you will not be following the stitch pattern, the lemon peel stitch pattern. But you see, in the next round, we are not continuing on with the stitch pattern. So it doesn't really matter. This is the only time you will change the stitch pattern. When you get to the end, and if you have an odd number of increases to work only 2 stitches into that last stitch. That way, you've only increased by 1 stitch in this increase. by working 2 stitches into the 1 stitch. I hope that that makes sense. It does sound really confusing. Yeah, but so that's how you would increase when working an odd number of increases. So here I am continuing on with my stitch pattern. All I'm doing here is repeating round 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 to get the extreme drop stitch pattern complete along this top edge of the sleeve. Okay, so I did need to go back and adjust that last increase because I did show you the odd number of increases, but I needed 2 increases in that last stitch. So that's just a correction on my part. For the next round, I'm repeating round 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the extreme drop stitch pattern detail. I've continued on and I've completed the extreme drop stitch pattern detail along the top edge of my sleeve. You can then fasten off, leaving behind a long enough tail to help with the seaming. We will now work the ribbing along the bottom edge of the sleeve. But before doing so, we do need to close up on the little gap between our stitches for round 1. Now for closing up this little gap and working the ribbing, I will show it to you on the one sleeve, and you will follow the exact same principles for the bottom of the sweater and for the other sleeve. So you will close up the gaps in the same way and work the ribbings in the same way. For my sleeves, I will use a 4mm hook, but for the ribbings along the bottom edge and the neckline, I use the 6mm hook. Okay, so let's get on with closing this little gap between our stitches. Insert your hook into the stitch on the one side. That's the side that does not have the tail end attached to it, right here. Take the tail end and pull it through the hook, through that stitch. Pull tight to secure. Now on the opposite stitch, attach your hook and pull the tail end through that stitch as well. We will, a little later on, weave in the tail end to secure it. Continuing on with the ribbing, attach yarn to a stitch. Round 1 of the ribbing, chain 2. For the ribbing, we will be alternating front post double crochets with back post double crochets. We'll be working these stitches into the posts. So this is the post of the stitch. To work a front post double crochet, it's yarn over, insert the hook into the post of the stitch going from the front, pull up a loop. You have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, go through 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, go through 2 loops on your hook. And into the next post, we'll work a back post double crochet. So it's yarn over, insert your hook into the post of the stitch, going from behind, as I am doing here, pull up a loop. You've got 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, go through 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, go through 2 loops on your hook. Into the next stitch, work a back post double crochet. So it's the same, you're going through the back of the post of that stitch. Into the next stitch, work a front post double crochet. Here you're going through the front of the post. Into the next stitch, a front post double crochet. So for this ribbing, you're alternating between 2 front post double crochets and 2 back post double crochets. Continue on to the end of the round. I've worked my way to the end of round 1. To complete the round, slip stitch into the second chain from chain 2 to join. Round 2, chain 2 and turn. Now take note here, when working your stitches, notice that the front post double crochets now look like the back post double crochets, and the back post double crochets now look like the front post double crochets. So you will work back post double crochets into all stitches that look like back post double crochets, even though you had worked those stitches as front post double crochets in the previous round. So into the next stitch, I've worked a back post double crochet. Into the stitch right here, I'm working a back post double crochet. Into the next 2 stitches, they look like front post double crochets. I'll work front post double crochets into the posts of these stitches. I'll work my next front post double crochet. Take note of where I'm working my stitch into. So that's the post that I'm working my stitch into. Into the next 2 stitches, I'll work back post double crochets. Continue on with the stitch pattern to the end of the round. I've completed round 2 of the ribbing. For round 3, it's chain 2, turn, and all you're doing is repeating round 2. You may work as many rounds of the ribbing as you wish to lengthen up on the sleeve even further. So now that the sleeves are complete and I've sewn along the shoulders, we can go ahead and attach the sleeve to the armhole spaces. Now you need to make certain that the body of the sweater is wrong sides facing out and right sides facing in. So I've got it here turned wrong side facing out. But with your sleeve, you need your sleeve right side facing out and wrong sides facing in. Take your sleeve and tuck it into the neckline, as I am doing here, aligning the edges of the sleeve with the edges of the armhole spaces. Align the tail end of the sleeve with the exact underarm of the armhole space, as I am doing here. So here's my tail end, and it's in line with the underarm. Using your yarn needle, seam the edges of the sleeve to the edges of the armhole space. I've seamed the sleeves to the body of the sweater, as you see here. Now we will work the ribbing along the neckline. Attach yarn to the center back of the neckline. The ribbing for the neckline is the same as we had worked for the sleeve. The only difference here is that we first need to work 1 round of double crochets before being able to work the ribbing. So here it's a chain 2 and we're working double crochets all around the neckline. There will be certain areas of this neckline that have no stitches to work into. You will work your stitches into the little gaps along the way. Like here, there are no stitches, so work your stitches into the little gaps. Keep your stitches evenly spaced throughout. I've continued on. I've completed the ribbing. I worked the round of double crochets, and then I worked a round of front post double crochets alternating with back post double crochets. I also worked the ribbing along the bottom edge of my sweater. All that's left to do is to weave in all the ends. So with your yarn needle, you'll thread in your yarn and The thing here is to weave your ends back and forth into the stitches on the wrong side of the sweater. And so that does it for this tutorial. I hope that you enjoyed it and thank you for watching.